These two guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said,
And
Alexis
welcome in to the Scoops podcast. I hear Alexis. I mean, it's Judd, it's Doogie, it's Declan, but clearly we're joined by a very special guest. What's Alexis saying, Doogie?
You know what? She is referencing something with Dr. Martin Luther King.
Okay.
Couldn't quite make out what she was saying, but yeah, it's a good morning message at approximately 8:35 a.m. Central every single morning. Thank you for your flexibility. We normally don't go back and forth this early, but I'd like to go meet Joey Gallo. I'd like to get to know Joey Gallo. So the Twins are hosting something with Gallo in a few hours. So I need to be there.
Hold on a second.
Thank you for allowing me to do this early.
Hold on a second. I'm going to check for my invitation to that. Oh, it appears it got lost. It must have gone into my junk mail. I don't know what happened. I will not meet Joey Gallo today. I am very upset. Actually, let's start with this. Let's start Vikings coming off the biggest comeback in the history of the National Football League. Still incredible to say. Against the Colts on Saturday. The division has now been clinched. What can you tell us about a team that is now clinched its division, has 3 games left? And here's the weird thing. So the victory itself, the first half was terrible. The second half, Doogie, was great. But I think what makes this most intriguing is this remains, especially defensively, obviously a very, very flawed team at times. But you cannot downplay that win and the resilience that team showed on Saturday.
That's exactly it. I'm actually more concerned right this moment with the special teams than the defense. Although Greg Joseph, 11 consecutive field goal makes, 9 consecutive extra point makes. So the kicker isn't an issue, but special teams across the board outside of kicking has been an issue. The defense came up with some stops, right, Judd? I mean, the Colts had 9 possessions after halftime, only scored 3 points. They only gave up the 1 touchdown, right? I mean, when you look at it, so there were improvements. We saw some schematic changes. We saw some personnel changes. Asezi Otomewo, the former Gopher, played 14 snaps. He played a bunch of third down snaps. Now, if Patrick Jones was able to play, he was at the stadium, but the illness was still getting to him. So that may have been different. We may not have seen Otomewo, but blitzing 40% of the time, we haven't seen anything quite like that. And different guys blitzing, right? Whether it was Sullivan, Hicks, Kendricks, Smith, right? Like, just we haven't seen that. So clearly they worked on some changes. Whether those changes impact these games moving forward, Judd, I'm not so confident about that. They can win games. The offense can certainly score enough points, but like the defense still worries me greatly. Judd, what the Vikings are hoping for is to be able to secure the 2 seed before that last game. I guess it would be now, week 18, that game in Chicago. If you think about that turf in Chicago, I had somebody with the Vikings tell me this the other day. That turf is so bad.
Yep.
Like, the Vikings don't want to risk injury the week before a playoff game. So we know at this point, like, I don't think even with Jalen Hurts down that the Eagles are going to stumble 2 or 3 times. So to me, the Eagles are locked in as the 1 seed. So the Vikings are going to play a game the weekend of January 14th. We don't know if it'll be that Saturday, that Sunday. There's even one game on Monday night, January 16th. But it will be a relatively quick turnaround, a normal turnaround, but they won't have a free week. So after that Chicago game on January 8th, they need to be ready to go, right? So they would love to be able to rest a number of guys on January 8th in Chicago, but they also realize the importance of the 2 seed. San Francisco has the tiebreaker over the Vikings. So if the Niners win out, if the Vikings trip once, the Niners would be the 2 seed. So if you think about that second playoff weekend, the weekend of January 21st, like, do you want the Niners here or do you want to go to Santa Clara, right? Like, to me, you can beat the Niners here. Don't know if you want to play them in Santa Clara.
Yeah, because they're going to be incredibly tough. That defense is absolutely outstanding for them. So as hard as this is to believe, I think it's a fair question, and I think I know what the potential answer is. Is Duke Shelley now the starting right outside cornerback for the this team. Now, Dantzler, I don't know if he was sick or still banged up, but Duke Shelley, PFF-wise, Duke's graded out tops among Vikings defenders on Saturday and played well. So is that position change, at least for now, as permanent as it can possibly be?
79 snaps for Shelley. I was as curious as everybody at the stadium. We see the game day deactivations at 10:30 a.m. No listing of Cam Dantzler. I told you about Garrett Bradbury. I told you. Now, I wasn't
You did.
necessarily sure he wasn't going to play against the Colts, but I
Yep.
told you the back was really, really troublesome.
Yep.
And it continues to be troublesome. Now, I was at practice on Wednesday. He was out there at least limited, looked okay, wasn't grimacing. So I thought, okay, maybe he has turned a corner. But I just know going back a few days prior to that, he was telling a number of people, my back is really, really effed up. Like, it's hard for me to walk at times. So
Yeah.
that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, Duke Shelley, 79 snaps. You mentioned it. Highest rated defender per PFF. We are going to see Duke Shelley moving forward. The question is, do they mix and match at times? You know, with Cam, it was more the illness. Although he was there, right? Like, it's not like he was at home. I mean, clearly,
Right.
I mean, if he was at home, they would have made him a game day deactivation.
Right.
He was at US Bank Stadium. The ankle is not 100%, but it was more the illness that had him down on Saturday. Just couldn't get to a point of just feeling, 100% or close to 100% health-wise in that regard. And so, yeah, we saw Duke. I mean, how would you bench Duke, right? Not like the Giants have this potent passing attack, but come Saturday, like, how would you not see Duke Shelley out there, even if it's every other series or however you want to mix and match? We are going to see Duke Shelley on the field. That I can tell you, Judd.
KJ Osborne, who had, he's gotten some chances up until the game against the Colts. He's gotten some chances, not a ton. And I think we were all a little bit disappointed because it didn't feel like he was really building off the success of 2021. In that game on Saturday, he was absolutely outstanding. Now, I know that this is probably internally a sensitive subject, but it seems logical after what we saw in that game, where your depth chart, at least internally, would be Jefferson 1, obviously, KJ Osborne 2, because he can get yards after the catch. He can run. And Thielen, still playing a very important role to catch key passes, is the third guy. Do you sense from your sources a shift in thinking about how Osborne was used? Because if he got that extra opportunity on Saturday, which he certainly did, it feels like he took off. And it feels like there is more there to give when they do give him more chances.
Well, I mean, Thielen hasn't been, we've touched on this, he hasn't been 100% for a while. So, I mean,
Yes.
there's been some health concerns there. I mean, certainly game circumstances on Saturday dictated the action that Osborne got. But yeah, like internally, I mean, there's been this belief that, hey, like going back to the film, a lot of these coaches saw last year. Remember the game-winning touchdown in Carolina, right? There was this thought that Osborne was going to take off much more than he has this year. But maybe that is the taking off point from Saturday. He was brilliant. Now, the Colts secondary, minus Moore, they were down a pretty good corner there, right? I mean, certainly matchups helped. But yeah, I mean, what he can do, he can stretch the field. Yeah, yak yards after catch. Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, Thielen wasn't even targeted, Judd, until what? Third quarter, middle of the third quarter, late third quarter. We've seen that some other instances too. That's not the first time that the targets for Thielen haven't increased until way later in the game. Adam is still going to be a dynamic red zone target. If we're talking fantasy, right? I mean, you can still put Adam Thielen in your lineup because Kirk is going to look his way in the red zone. But yes, I think we've started to see that shift a little bit. Yeah, maybe Saturday was that taking off point where KJ certainly is getting more targets, against the Giants, against the Packers, against the Bears moving forward.
All right, let's talk some Wolves, if that's cool, because I watched that game last night, my man. And against the Mavs, this looks like, and it really is, a different team. No Gobert, no Cat, no McLaughlin. They're down actually some very key players. They're 6-4 in their last 10. they have won now back-to-backs because they played the Bulls and scored 150 points on Sunday. All right. Tell me how this is going to work going forward, because that team that I saw last night, the ball was not sticky. The movement was fantastic. The spacing looked really good. Like all of the things that we were talking about 2 weeks in of, oh my God, how's this going to work without some of your best players on the floor? And D'Lo, who now is basically no longer saddled with being a pure point guard, is playing fantastic because he's not really a pure point guard. As guys start to come back, how does this still work? Because what we're seeing now is exactly what the Timberwolves wanted, which is really good basketball.
Yes, I mean, Judd, it's a joyful bunch. That joyfulness is translating into wins.
Yeah.
For so long, they appeared joyless. And it really goes back to Friday. I mean, it tells you how fast it can shift, because last Wednesday, they couldn't make a shot in Los Angeles. If they had just simply made a couple shots, not like the Clippers were shooting the lights out, but they lose that game. But then Friday, OKC, Sunday, Chicago, Monday, Dallas. We've seen a nice shift. And oh, by the way, don't sleep on the Thunder. Like the Thunder beat the Blazers last night. So not like that was just a guaranteed win on Friday, especially down the guys that they are down. You mentioned three of the guys, but what about Taurean Prince? What about Kyle Anderson? His back acted up again. So Kyle was out last night. Just tells you what we thought going back to training camp, that this team was incredibly deep. Austin Rivers now has a pulse. Forbes is actually making a shot or two. Like Bryn Forbes is a really good three-point shooter. Like prior to the last couple games, he had made all of like 7 3-pointers all year. Now I get it. The minutes haven't been there necessarily, but he's also missed a lot of shots for being a good shooter. Well, all of a sudden, okay, he's playing a bit better. Jalen Noel. Really, if you look at their three-point numbers, Judd, the three-point numbers have gone up significantly, right? It's not a team that early on was shooting a lot of threes just based on personnel. You weren't, right? Last year led the NBA in three-point attempts. With this personnel, you weren't going to lead the NBA in three-point attempts, but you're still going to shoot a good number of threes. Well, going back the last 3 games, they are making those threes. The standings still fascinate me, Judd. Like even last night, Sacramento loses, Portland loses, Phoenix does win, but you've got teams above them. Utah also lost that are losing. A bunch of these teams are they're stuck in the middle, right? Like Dallas last night, 15-15. The Wolves were 15-15. Okay, now the Wolves are 1 game above 500. Dallas 1 game below, right? Like Dallas is trying to figure stuff out. Heck, in the East, Chicago. Like how bad was Chicago on Sunday? Speaking of joyless, whoa. Zach LaVine, the body language just suggests, get me the heck out of here. Can't keep doing this. Toronto is trying to figure stuff out. There are just so many teams stuck in the middle. I love it, right? I mean, it makes so many games intriguing, but I just didn't think 30, 31 games into the season, these teams would be all bunched together. I thought there would be a bit more separation. It speaks to the Wolves are still in a position to accomplish their preseason goal. Now, would I bet on it? No, but like being a top 4 team in the Western Conference is still very much there for the taking. And you know what? This difficult schedule, like going back 2 weeks, I looked at the Wolves' schedule for the rest of the season. 7th toughest in the league, but maybe some of these teams aren't as tough as we thought. Plus, it is survival of the fittest. I mean, the Wolves are down all these guys, but, you know, Dallas, no Tim Hardaway Jr. Don't believe Dwight Powell played last night. Luka Doncic played, Judd, but you watched it. He's not healthy. He missed their game on Saturday in Cleveland. He's dealing with a lower body injury. You know, who knows if he'll be able to go tomorrow. So many of these teams are dealing with significant injuries. And clearly the Wolves are too, right? So really it's survival of the fittest. You know, these teams, you know, who do they have available on a nightly basis? That will, you know, ultimately determine, you know, how many wins the Wolves can get the rest of the year. Can they get past 46? They had 46 last year. Can they find a pathway to getting past 46 this year? And even if they do, does that get you out of the play-in? Like if they're in the play-in again, you know, no matter what they say, that would be a massive disappointment. If they need to play a 1-game scenario to get into the playoffs. They need to minimum be the 5 or the 6 seed. But the goal, I'm telling you, Judd, I don't know if they stated it or not preseason, but behind the scenes it was, we want home court advantage in the first round, which means we need to be a top 4 team in the Western Conference.
Hey, quickly back to the Wolves, a little bit of breaking news as we record this on a Tuesday morning. The Vikings have signed quarterback Josh Rosen to their practice squad. Josh Rosen, the former first-round pick by the Arizona Cardinals. They lost David Blau, I believe, correct, off their practice squad.
They did Arizona.
Week.
Yeah.
So now Josh Rosen has been signed to the Vikings practice squad as of this morning, 8:50 a.m.
Yeah, was he with Kwesi at one point in Cleveland?
He's
bounced around so
everybody.
much. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the connection he has with the Viking staff. But yeah, the Vikings were looking to add a quarterback after losing out on Blau. I mean, for no other reason than just, practice reps, snaps. So Cousins isn't throwing, all these balls at practice where you can mix and match, especially in the individual drills and, before they go 11 on 11 or 7 on 7, that they needed another quarterback. So it was inevitable. They did have a CFL quarterback in yesterday for a workout, Nathan Rourke, the best quarterback up in Canada. But based on the rules, you can't sign a CFL player right now and add him to your roster. The best you can do is sign that player to a futures contract, which would come to fruition after the season in January, for instance. So you can't sign a player that played the CFL season. So the Vikings had a couple CFL players in on Monday for workouts, but you cannot sign those guys right now. But yeah, I'm not shocked. After losing Blau, they were looking to add a quarterback. So it's a name, former first-round pick. I think of Josh Rosen in that hot tub, many moons ago. Remember pre-draft, he had that hot tub in his apartment room or whatever, the living room, dorm, whatever. I can visualize Rosen in that hot tub. So yeah, hot tub guy is now in that Vikings locker room.
So back to the Wolves. So after the game on Sunday, Chris Finch was asked about the team and about Cat. And I don't know, and you can certainly tell us when Cat might be back. But more importantly, Finch talked about the spacing and what he was going to do and mentioned putting Cat in the corner basically to help the spacing out. How, in your opinion, and from what you've heard, Dukes, how does this work? Like Gobert comes back, I sort of get that. I think that, I don't know, it's seamless, but I don't think it's very difficult. But like when Cat is back and you think about what this team started out the year thinking or trying to do, and with the way that they're playing now, how do some of these very important pieces fit back in to make it seamless? Because you definitely 1000% do not want to take a step back to where this team was at the start of the season when it was rocky and when D'Lo was, playing just awful. And now he's been fantastic without those guys.
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily last night, but yeah, the previous 5 or 6 games, D'Lo was great. That's the fascinating question, right, Judd? I mean, outside of what Finchy volunteered on Sunday, Wolves people behind the scenes have been reluctant to even go down this path, right? And on Cat, I mean, it was always going to be Christmas, kind of that week after Christmas. So I guess the week of December 26th, where they would reevaluate. So he's still at least a few weeks out, right? So they have some time to still figure this out. It's hard for me to imagine Cat just standing there in the corner. It's hard for me to truly envision that. But
yeah,
you think about the spacing. Heck, I'll give you an observation. You don't think it'll be as clunky when Gobert comes back. Like I watched Naz Reid in the pick and roll, just the fluidity, the way he moves.
True.
And Gobert can't move like that.
No, you're right.
Right? So, yeah, okay. Yeah, more clunky when Cat comes back compared to Gobert, but there's still some clunkiness when Gobert can come back from the ankle injury, which will be pretty darn soon. I don't know if it'll be as soon as tomorrow, but like he's relatively close. This is not a long-term type injury, right? So like I'm even curious on that. Gobert as the pick and roll, continues to evolve. But like Ant, I mean, how great has Ant been? We talked about year 3, right? We've pointed to Ja Morant last year, year 2 to year 3, some other examples. We're now starting to see it. Like that superstardom that we thought was possible, maybe relatively small sample size these last, 5 to 10 games, but Ant has taken off, Judd.
But there's a reason why, Darren.
How do you maintain that level,
yes,
right, when Cat comes back?
Right.
That is the question. Even when Gobert comes back, because he's going to clunk it up some in the lane. So that is the $1 million question. I'm just telling you, the Wolves have been reluctant to really talk about that, even behind the scenes, right? So that is something absolutely on my radar. It's a very fair inquiry. It's what Wolves fans should be talking about right now. I just don't have every single answer right this second.
And Ant, there's no question about it. And this is the tough thing. Now, nobody is saying that Carl is not a marvelous talent, because he is. Okay, so hear me clearly. But sports teams are made up of human beings who fit together both on and off the court or the ice or the field in certain ways. To your point about Ant, it's very clear that from the get-go right now that this is just Ant's team. And D'Lo, I think, is fine with that. Like, he's better if you don't emphasize him. So, like, if he can do his thing. But you bring up the very interesting point of, the second Cat comes back, Cat thinks that this is his team. And the more I've thought about this, Cat's whole thing about Ant and the Popeyes and stuff too, it was humorous. It was tone deaf, but I also think it was Cat's way of trying to emphasize, this is my team. I lead the way. Like Ant's a young man and I lead the way. But you just hit on it. Ant's in his third year now, and he's still a young man, but he's not a young player now. 3 years in, you've got a lot of reps and experience. So, like, this is where I think the rubber meets the road, and the Wolves have put together what appears to be a very, very good fantasy league team. Like, oh my God, I got Gobert, I got Cat, I got Ant, I got D'Lo. But when you involve the fact that they're actually living, breathing people trying to work together on and off the floor, I think it gets a lot more dicey. And so, like, you bring up a really good point about Ant. I guess I have questions about, it feels like Ant goes back to deferring more when Cat comes back, and I don't know that that's good for the team.
Well, I mean, maybe the simple solution is, so preseason, the plan was, okay, the big four would be on the court, the first, 8-9 minutes of the game. Okay, the last, 3-4-ish minutes of the game, but there's a lot of minutes in between where you can mix and match. So the idea preseason was, okay, Cat, you will be tied to Ant. D'Lo, you'll be tied to Gobert. You've never had a guy like that here in Minnesota that can run the pick and roll, so that would be the idea. It worked well in Brooklyn when you had Jared Allen. Let's see if we can duplicate that here in Minnesota. Well, guess what? Maybe you need to scrap that plan, which we did see the first 12, 15, 18 games before Cat got hurt.
Yep.
Maybe Cat and Ant should not be on the court together. Right? Maybe that's the simple solution. Now they're going to have to be on the court together, for stretches, right? Start of the game, end of the game. You need to practice all those scenarios. But in between, Judd, I think the simple solution might be, Ant, you're no longer tied to Cat, right? Like, no. I just know this much. It's clear as day how much fun Ant is having. Naz Reid even pointed to that post-game last night, that he's never seen Ant this happy. Judd, it's not any sort of coincidence. So,
right.
Like, I've always thought, for this team to truly get where it wants to get to, second round of the playoffs, a run to the Western Conference Finals, take your chances from that point on, that this has to be Ant's team. It cannot be Cat as the alpha.
On to the Twins. Does the presence of and signing of Joey Gallo mean that Max Kepler's days as a Twin are for sure done?
Yeah, I mean, I brought this up even when that Luis Arise story came out from The Athletic, and everybody was like, oh, the Twins are going to trade Arise. And I'm like, what about Kepler? Like, nobody's talking about Max. I mean, they're getting inquiries on him. They're open-minded to trading Max. They're open-minded to doing a lot of things. It wasn't just Arise, who still, by the way, could possibly get traded. Don't know if I would bet on it, but like, Miami absolutely likes Luis Arise, right? But yeah, I mean, with the Gallo signing, yes, I see Max Kepler ending up somewhere else. It'll be interesting to see who doesn't get Michael Conforto. Now, there's some shoulder concerns with the free agent, but like, the Rangers have interest in Michael Conforto. If the Rangers don't get Conforto, the Rangers have some middle infielders, right? So could there be a match for a potential shortstop, right? The Rays had interest in Michael Brantley. Well, they didn't get Michael Brantley, right? Could there be a potential match there? The Rays have some middle infielders. The Blue Jays, maybe not necessarily a middle infielder to trade, but the Jays were in on Michael Brantley. Okay, well, Brantley goes back to the Astros. They missed out on the left-handed hitting Outfielder, okay, well, maybe Toronto has some interest in Kepler. The Yankees have interest in Max Kepler. So there are teams. The Twins continue to plant some seeds. The trade market has moved really, really slow, but you can go trade for a shortstop. The Padres are listening, on one of their guys. The Twins have planted all those seeds. Baltimore, Mateo, like the Twins have planted all those seeds. Rojas with the Marlins. All these names have come up at Target Field. I don't sense right now. I mean, it can shift fast, but you look at Elvis Andrus or Iglesias, the two best remaining free agent shortstops. I just don't sense the Twins are signing either of those guys. I mean, if anything, you roll with Kyle Farmer. Either of those guys really better than Kyle Farmer, but you can go trade for one of these guys, right? If you want to. I don't know if you want to give up pitching. Like Baltimore's looking for pitching for Mateo, right? So I don't know if the Twins want to give up pitching for Mateo, but can you use Kepler in some sort of trade? Maybe it's Kepler plus somebody else for some middle infielder, a guy that can certainly play shortstop. That would be something I certainly would keep an eye on.
Is Gallo so right field DH, and is he the fallback plan when Buxton gets hurt?
Yeah, I mean, you'll get that on the record later today, but they'll even use him at first base, but all three outfield spots. Now, okay. I'm not suggesting he's going to play a ton in center, but yes, the idea is he can play center. So yes, right field, center field, left field, first base, sure, DH, although with the swing and the miss, right? Like he plays Gold Glove defense. That's the difference between him and Miguel Sano.
Right.
He swings and misses like Miguel.
Yep.
The power certainly is there, right? He's going to draw walks too, but you want him in the field playing defense.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see him corner outfield more than anything. But yes, he is an option in center. He's an option at first base.
Final scoops before we let you go.
Well, on Dansby Swanson. So in the end, the Twins were not in it. Like they got the sense, they had the video call with him. They had a number of conversations with his representation, but they never got the sense that Dansby wanted to be here. Right. Wife plays for the Chicago soccer team. Like Chicago was always a target. Like for the Twins to have a realistic chance at Swanson, it would have had to have been like an 8 or 9 year deal. Like he goes to Chicago for what, 177, something like that. If the Twins had made that offer, he wasn't picking the Twins over the Cubs. So, however you want to, look at the Twins off season. I know some people who say, okay, all 4 shortstops, end up switching teams. I guess in Correa's case, the hope was he would just re-sign, not switch teams. But the Twins don't end up with any of those guys. Yep. Disaster of a winter. I'll just say, to me, there's still more time to do some stuff. They remain involved on Nathan Eovaldi. Now, they'd have to give up a draft pick. There's some injury concerns there. We can debate how good Nate Eovaldi is, but to me, he would help the rotation, whether he slots in right above Sonny Gray or right below. Like, to me, if you can add Nate Eovaldi, why not? Now, I think it'll take a 4-year deal in the $65, $70, $75 million range, but the Twins do have money, but I get it. If there's some injury concerns, his age is 35, 36 seasons. I understand it, but they remain engaged on a Nate Eovaldi. So more moves are coming, but in the end, just Dansby Swanson he wasn't going to end up here. Talks never really progressed.
Outstanding stuff, sir. We will talk to you for Reckless Speculation Thursday with Phil, okay?
Okay, thanks, Judd. Appreciate your flexibility today.
Sure.